Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Kamma daf Nun Hey. That is the last amud of the fifth parak, and we'll begin the sixth parak of Bava Kamma. Very exciting as we make our way through the Masechet. About halfway through, and we are at the bottom of Nun Dalet Amabet, second line from the bottom. And let me share my screen, and we will get started. So the we have been yesterday we were talking about the prohibition of animals working on Shabbat and how it applies to all sorts of animals. You can't have your ox plow, you can't have your donkey plow, and you can't have any kind of animal. That's essentially what the Torah says in the second set of Luchot. But not even dogs. You can't have your dog do work for you on Shabbos. So, for example, let's say your dog knows how to dig a trench, and you want the dog to do some digging for you. You can't tell your dog to do the digging on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do that. If the dog does it on its own, then that's fine. But you can't ask the dog to do it. You can't do anything to indicate to the. Now, what about if you own an
I
ostrich?
actually had a Shiloh about that with our cat.
Yeah. Oh well. Hold on for a
It
second.
tears toilet paper 7 days a week.
What does it do to toilet paper?
The cat tears toilet paper 7 days a week.
Yes, but is it a positive tearing of toilet paper or a negative tearing of toilet paper?
Well, it's useful to have torn toilet paper on Shabbat.
So it tears it in a way that you could actually still use it. That's the key.
Yes,
Yeah, so if you were to ask it to do it, so that would be a problem. But if it's just doing it on its own, then I don't think that's a problem.
it's doing it
So
because it's a cat, not because we asked it to do it.
exactly, cats tend not to be the one animals that do things because you ask them to. So
Right.
so I don't think that would be a problem. But if, on the other hand, you had a dog that was sort of much more well behaved and only did it if you said, okay, Fido, go tear the toilet paper, that would actually probably be a problem. And not only if you had Fido, but if you had, Oscar the ostrich, that would also be a problem. It doesn't make a difference what animal. And we said that teaching of the fact that it applies to even to birds or even to fish, we're going to have a situation, crazy situation. You guys are going to love this situation. Can you imagine a fish? Maybe it's not really a fish, it's a mammal, but a dolphin, for example, pulling a a wagon along the seashore. That we're going to have that case at the end of during the course of today's daf. So very interesting situation. So who's the famous rabbis today? We're going to have a little bit of Rashi. I think we might have a Tosos, but in any event, the bottom line is that we've been talking about these animals working on Shabbos and different rules that apply not only to, even though we say donkey and ox, it applies even to other kinds of animals, even to birds, even to fish. And so now we're going to, having noted that that teaching is based in part upon the difference between those first set, the Aseret Dibrot, as they appear in Parshas Yisro and Sefer Shmos, and the Luchot and the Aseret Dibrot as they appear in Parshas Veschanan in Sefer Dvarim. So we're going to now raise another difference between the commandment to honor one's parents in the first Luchot and the second Luchot. So let's get right to it. So Shal Rabbi Chanina ben Agil es Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Again, second line up from the on Nun Dalet Bet from the very bottom. Mibnei Mamba Dibrot Harishonot Lo Ne'emar Bahem Tov. Why do the first set of the Dibrot, why does it not have the word Tov in it? Ubidibrot ha'achronot, as we turn to Nun Hey Amud Aleph, Ne'emar Bahem Tov. It does say the word Tov. Now Rashi tells us one explanation for this. Ne'emar Bahem Tov, Gabi Kibud Avaim, Diksiv Bahen Leman Yitav Lach. That in the second set of Luchot, it says that if you observe the commandment of honoring one's parents, then one is going to, it's going to be good for them. And we say that they're going to have a long life, etc. Now, that line of Laman Yitavlach is only in the Luchot in Dvarim. It's not mentioned in the Luchot in Sefer Shmot. And so that's the question. Now, there is an alternative read to this question. Art Scroll notes that based on a Balaturim, the Tur in his commentary on the Torah notes that there are 17 additional words in the Dibrot in Dvarim. Well, 17 happens to have the same numerical value as the word Tov. Tet is 9, Vav is 6, 9 plus 6 is 15, plus Vet is 2, plus 2 is 17. So that's how you get Tov. So when it says, why is there Tov only in the second set, it's referring to it could also be referring to the 17 additional words. In any event, what does Rabbi Chia bar Abba answer? Amrlo ad sha'ata sho'aleini lama ne'amar bahem tov sha'aleini im ne'amar bahem tov im lav. So Rabbi Chia answers, don't ask me why, ask me whether, because I'm not even sure. She'eni yodea im ne'amar bahem tov im lav. I don't know whether it's written. Now, there's an interesting Tosfos that we have. It's cited in the Aleph of Mesoras Hashas that is pointed to in Bava Basra Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, where Tosfos there says actually sometimes the rabbis were not experts in the text of the Torah. Now that's a little bit difficult because they seem to really have been experts. So another answer that is given here, which is noted, it's Rabbi Yoshiyahu Pinto in his commentary, which is referred to as the Biurei Harif. It's not the Rif as in the back of our Gemara, who was the halachist, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi. That's a different Rif. But in any event, this Biurei Harif that's included in the Ein Yaakov suggests that the question was not about the text of the Torah, but the text that was actually written on the Luchot. Have you ever seen the 10 Commandments, Mark, the movie? Yeah, so you know he comes down with these 2 big tablets and then he breaks them, right? So there were 2 sets of them. There's the one before he broke, and then and he changed the water. He spread, divided the water so that the Jewish people could walk through. That's right. So the point is that when we had 2 sets, and the assumption of the question, the assumption of Rabbi Chanina ben Agil is that the first set of Luchot matched the wording of the Aseret HaDibrot in Shmot, and the second set of Luchot matched the wording of the Aseret HaDibrot in Sefer Devarim. And so if you were to say that, well, then you have the question that Rabbi Chanina ben Agil asks, that why is it only in the first, why is Tov only mentioned in the second set and not in the first? And one can therefore understand Rabbi Chia bar Abba as answering that how do you know that in fact the actual physical Luchot that were given on Har Sinai the first time matched the language in Sefer Shmot, and the second time it matched the language in Sefer Dvarim? It doesn't have to be that way. It could just be 2 different retellings, or it could be the opposite. I mean, it could be a number of possibilities. So the point is that we don't know the answer to that question. And so as a result, that's what Rabbi Chia bar Abba is responding, that I don't even know what was actually written on it because we never saw the Luchot. The Luchot had disappeared by the end of the first Beit HaMikdash. So what does Rabbi Chia suggest? So he says, Kilach Eitzel Rabbi Tanchum bar Chanilai. Go over to Rabbi Tanchum bar Chanilai, Shahaya Ragil Eitzel Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, because he would learn with Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Shahaya Baki ba'agada. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi was a Baki, was a was an expert in these kinds of teachings, this kind of agadic teaching that doesn't have direct halachic ramification, but tells us a little bit about our history. And so Azul Gabe, so Rabbi Chanina went to him. And Amrlai and Rabbi Tanchum responded, Mimenu lo shamati. I actually never heard this teaching in connection with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. However, Ela kach Amar li Shmuel bar Nachum achi imo shel Rav Acha b'Rabbi Chanina. That here's what I heard from Shmuel bar Nachum, who was the maternal uncle of Rav Acha bar Chanina. Or alternatively, Amrila, Abi Imo Shel Rav Achai Rabbi Chanina. Or maybe he was the grandfather of Rabbi Achai Rabbi Chanina. In any event, Hoil V'Sofan Lehishtaber. The end result is that the first luchot were going to be destroyed. That's why we did not have the word tov in it, or that's why there weren't the extra words. Well, who cares? Why does it matter whether the word tov is there or whether the extra words are there or not? So Amar Rav Ashi chas v'shalom paska tova mi-Yisrael. So Rav Ashi explains that the point is that it's metaphorical. The point is that if you imagine the breaking of the luchot with the word tov in it, or with the extra words in it that count up to the word tov, that would on some level suggest the ending of goodness for the Jewish people. And so because we don't want to do that, we don't want that to happen, Hashem on some level knew that the first set of luchot were going to be broken. And so as a result, Hashem did not include those words in the luchot. All right, so that is one aspect of another key difference between the first set of luchot and the second set of luchot is interesting, and that leads us now to two other lessons of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The first of which is going to relate to the word tov itself. So let's take a look. So Amar Rabbi Yeshua and Masoras Hashas adds ben Levi. Again, to help with the consistency that it's the same person that we referenced that was the expert in Agadic teaching. And so he's the one who said this. Haroa tet b'cholamo. If you see the letter tet in a dream, siman yafello. That is a good sign. So if you want to have a good sign for yourself, think about the letter tet before you go to sleep, and hopefully you'll have that sign in your dream. My timer. Why is it a good sign? If you're going to tell me because the word tov starts with the letter tet, well, 1 second. Ema v'tetesia b'mat'atei hashmeid, and I will sweep it clear with the broom of destruction. That is from Yeshayahu, Parak Yudalet Pasuk Kaf Gimel. So how do I know that in fact it's talking about good? Maybe it relates to the destruction that's referred to in Yeshaya. Or so the answer is Chad Tes Kamrina. No, we're talking about where the person sees one tet, the letter tet, and so as a result, the pasuk in Yeshayahu has multiple tetim. So that can't be. So Ema the asa bishuleha. Well, 1 second. Then I can point you to Eicha, which is of course Lamentations, and is about we read on Tisha B'Av in connection with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which is a very sad and relates to destruction. So maybe it's referring to Eicha, where it says that her impurity is on her hems, and it's talking about the destruction of the Jewish people. So no, tet bet kamrina. No, we're talking about where the person saw both the letter tet and the letter bet. Well, that doesn't work either, because I can give you a pasuk where just one parak later in Eicha that suggests that there's a problem there too, because Ema tavu va'aretz sha'areha, her gates have sunk into the earth. So again, it can't just be that there's that you just see the letter tet. How come just the letter tet is considered good? So Ella, we reject all the answers that we've given, and we're going to give a new answer. It's not about one tet. It's not about seeing the letter tet and bet. Rather, it means just seeing the letter tet. But here's the reason that we're not going to focus on any of the negative psukim. Ho'il upatach bo akasel l'tova tchila. Because the first time that the letter tet appears in the Torah, it's with the word, with the word tov. Shemibereshis ad bayar elokim et haor lo ksiv tet. Because when it says all the way from the word Bereshis at the very beginning of the Torah until Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov, that it was good, there's no tet in the Torah. So the very first time you have a tet is when it says good. And so that's why if you have tet in a dream, that's a good sign. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, we have one more teaching of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and that is Haroa Hesped B'cholamo. If you see a hesped, a eulogy in your dream, now chasu alav min hashamayim ufda'uhu. So then this is an indication that God, that the heavens have spared the person and redeemed him. Now, how do you get that from the hesped? Because if you take a look, chasu, a chet and a het are very similar. So that you have the het and the hesped is hey samech hey dalid. So the chet and the samech of chasu is parallel to the het and the samech, and then ufda'ub, the pei and the dalid of pijon, of redeeming, is the end of the word hesped. So you combine it together and you get the fact that he's spared and had and redeemed. And of course, why not just have the word chaspad or chasu padahu padauhu? Because the point is that it's the hesped is in and of itself going to be a troubling thing for the person. So the whole point is that even though this might actually be a troubling dream, that you see it, it's going to actually indicate a positive. But what we're talking about is not that you imagine in your dream somebody talking at a funeral, but rather you actually see the word. So it's again a parallel to the seeing of the letter tet, which is going to be good for you. Similarly, seeing the word hesped also is going to be good for you. As Rashi notes, hesped tevazu levada harauhu. That only this word was the only word that was shown to him in the dream. Okay, so now we get back to Kilayim. And again, we had learned yesterday about how Kilayim applies to all different kinds of animals. This is the prohibition to do two things. You're not allowed to plow or have a wagon led by two different animals, and you can't mate two different animals. So we're going to talk about both the issues. So Amaresh Lakish, Kan Shana Rebbe, that in connection, so let's take a look again. First, the quote from the Mishnah. So similarly, Kilayim applies not only to just a ox and a donkey, but also to other wild beasts or even birds. So, and here is on this point, Reish Lakish says, Kan Shana Rebbe, Tarnagol Tavas Ufasyoni Kilayim Zebizet, that a cock, which is a kind of chicken, and a peacock, and well, this is partridge, but in Jastro, it translates it slightly different. It translates as a pheasant, and so all of them would constitute Kilayim. The idea
And
being,
Korax has a picture of a pheasant.
Okay, so there you go. So that's consistent with the Jastro. And so the idea is that these are different species, and as a result, if you mate them across each other, that's going to be a problem. Well, Pshita, it's obvious they're different species. Why would you think that you could do it? So Rav Chaviva explains, Mishum de Rabu Bahadi Hadadi, because these animals live together. Now, I don't know about peacocks, but certainly I would imagine that chickens and pheasants would be together. So Ma'odetema min chadhu, but so I might have thought that because they live together that they should all be treated as a single species. No, Kamash Valan, Reish Lakish is teaching us that Rebbe taught us not that. Okay, so that was rule number one. Next rule.
So those birds actually can mate and produce fertile offspring and sometimes do it in the wild.
Wow, did not know that. Okay, so that highlights that the potential is there. Very interesting. So Amar Shmuel, Avaz va'avaz habar kilayim b'zeh. That not only do you have radically different species that are considered different species, but even a domestic goose and a wild goose are considered klayim with one another. So maskiv lo Rav Rav Chanan, my timer. What's the reason? Because if you're going to tell me because one's got a long beak and one's got a short beak, Elamiata gamla parsa gamla taya. Well, what about a Persian camel and an Arabian camel? Though they also have a difference that's a relatively minor. Dahai alim koe, vahai katin koe. That its neck is thick and one's neck is thin. Would you tell me that you can't mate them? Because clearly the understanding is that you were allowed to mate them. So how does it work? So Ella Amar Abaye, so Abaye explains that from the male animals, the testicles of the male animals, for the wild goose, they're external, and for the domestic goose, they're internal. And that's what Rashi notes for us. Beit Savmi b'chutz, Beit Sei has charot nikaron ba'avos habar, that the wild one, they're recognizable from mibachutz, from the outside, but not for the domestic. Rav Papa Amar hata'una chada biyausa b'shichla v'hata'una kama biyasa b'shichla. That one of them bears just one egg in each gestational period, and another bears many eggs in each gestational period. And Rashi tells us which one is which. B'shichla b'te'ina achas, that in one gestational period, avos bar, the wild one, eino toan beitza shniya, will not have a second egg. Until it first lays the first one, but there's not a possibility of multiple growing within her. But in the domestic, and maybe that's why it was domestic, because it has the ability to produce eggs more quickly. So then it is possible. So those are, I don't know whether that's in fact the case, but these differences, which relate on some level to reproduction, that's why they are considered different species. But when they don't have those kind of differences with respect to reproduction, so then it would be considered one species, similar to the camels, the Arabian and Persian camels. All right, so that's ruling number 2. Then we come to ruling number 3. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rish Lakish. So this is said in the name of Rish Lakish. Hamarbiya shnei minin shebiyam loka. If you mate two kinds of animals of the sea, that also is going to be considered klayim. My taima, why? Amar of Ada bar Ahava mishmei deula asya lemineo miyabesha. We have a gzeira shava that in the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, it talks about different animals, limineihem, or with the different words. What was that? How many years do animals in the water live? I don't know. That's a good question. Some animals, turtles live in the water and they can live for over 100 years. So, bottom line is that those words are written both. It says limineihem in Perek Aleph Pasuk Kaf Aleph, and then it says limina in Perek Aleph Pasuk Kaf Hey. And so both that comparable wording in both cases tells us that there are going to be rules that apply to land animals and sea animals that are similar, and that we're going to say that this is teaching us that kilayim applies to each. So by Rechava asked an interesting question, and now we're going to get to the amazing story. Hamanig be'iza v'shibuta. If you have a a wagon that is being led by a goat and a shibuta. And the Rashi tells us that shibuta is a dag. It's some kind of water animal. Well, like I said, you see a goat on TV, yeah. So imagine a goat walking on the beach, and uh-huh. Oh, so that's even better. That's even better. The goats, the Aflac. Oh, okay. So the goat's in the water, and imagine that the next to the goat is a dolphin, also in the water, and they are pulling a wagon in the water together. So mahu, what is the law? Is that considered klayim or not? So mi amrin kaven to iza lo nachas biyam. Do we say that because the goat doesn't swim in the sea or doesn't go, underwater and live in the sea? Vishibuta lo salik liyabasha, and a fish can't go up on dry land. Lo klum avid. So then they haven't done anything. O dilma hashta mias kamanhig. Or the fact is that they're considered leading the same thing, and so as a result, it's considered kalayim. So Maskefalo Ravina. Ravina said, I object to this question because I think this is an obvious the answer is obvious. Elamiata chiber chita usa or biyado v'zara chita ba'aretz u'v'sa'ora b'chutz la'aretz. If you have wheat and barley in your hand, and you plant the wheat in Eretz Yisrael, and you plant the barley outside of Eretz Yisrael, hachinami de would we ever think that you would be obligated? Meaning that according to Ravina, he's trying to analogize inside the land of Israel and outside of the land of Israel as being on land and under sea, that those are two different areas, and therefore we don't combine. The problem with his explanation, and because we in fact do not combine, if you were to plant, even if this was the border of the land of Israel and outside the land of Israel, and you planted one right over here next to the border and another one right over here, where if you had planted it a foot into Israel, it would be a problem. So over here, it's not going to be a problem because one is not in the land of Israel. The problem is, and so as a result, maybe I would say the same thing by in the land in an on land animal and an in the sea animal. The problem is Amre Hachi Hashta. That's not comparable. Is that really a comparable comparison? Eretz Makom Chiyuva. The land of Israel is a place where you can have the possibility of Kalayim. But outside the land of Israel, there is no prohibition of planting wheat and barley immediately juxtaposed to one another. And so as a result, but when it comes to sea animals and land animals, both the land and the sea are places of potential obligation. You're not allowed to combine sea animals. You're not allowed to combine land animals. So maybe we would be able to say that it's a problem. Bottom line is the Gemara didn't answer our question. And so the Rush actually says that you're not allowed to do this. And so as a result, should you ever have the temptation of hooking up a wagon to a dolphin and the goat, don't do it. Okay. All right, so that leaves us Hadron Alach Shor Shanaga Kasapar, Hadron Alach Shor Shanaga Kasapar, Hadron Alach Shor Shanaga Kasapar. What? Well, it's a regular sized dolphin. I don't know, like bigger than my arm span. Dolphins are pretty big. So, all right. So
Two things before you go on. Corin identifies the fish as the one that I just put in the chat.
Okay.
It lives in Bavel. I asked Moshe at Geshmaka Fish about it. He knew all about it because he's a Talmud Chacham, and asked him if it was kosher he could get. He said thought it was kosher, but he didn't think he could import it.
Okay.
Which was disappointing. I will ask Rabbi Slifkin if he could serve it at one of his feasts at some point.
That'd be interesting.
And second, if you all love this Kalayim stuff, I'm making a siyum on Yerushalmi Kalayim this coming Shabbat, immediately after services at Bet Aron, and sponsoring Kiddush there.
Awesome, wonderful, that's amazing. All right, so good to have both of those things in mind. So may we be able to celebrate many siyumim together. All right, so that's a perfect lead-in with the siyum of the fifth parak. Now we go into the sixth parak. The sixth parak is going to, and we're going to return to the issue of watching animals. Tosfos notes that that we referenced that on some level this should have been earlier, but in fact once we dealt with an animal falling into a pit. So we had a further discussion of animals in pits. And now we're returning to sort of watching animals. So let's take a look. We're going to have a Mishnah that's going to have a bunch of different rules. So Hakonis, Son Ladir, you bring a sheep into its pen, and you lock it well, you lock it appropriately, and it somehow escapes and does damage, putter. You are not liable. Lo na'al b'fanei karoi. If you didn't not lock it well, the yatsa v'hizika, and it goes out and does damage. Well, then chayev, then you're going to be liable. Nifritza b'layla. If the pen was breached at night, meaning the fence fell down, something happened. Maybe let's say an avalanche came, and so it knocked the fence down. Oshipratsua listim, or robbers broke the fence because they were trying to come in. V'yatsa v'hizika, and the sheep escaped and did damage on its own. Putter. He's not going to be liable. No one's going to be liable. However, hotziuha listim, if the robbers actually took the animal out, listim chayavim, well, then the robbers themselves are going to be liable. And so that's going to be the story there. So, hanicha b'chama, that makes sense. Okay, so hanicha b'chama, if you left the animal in the sun, so Rashi is going to help us here because it's not completely clear what the story is. So hanicha b'chama, top line in Rashi, nun hey amabet, mitzara. Now it was left in the sun, and from its pain, mitzara la shimsha, from the pain that the sun was caused by it to it, the low sugile benila. Now it's not going to be enough for you to lock the gate, because locking the gate karoi in a regular way to mukaminan, because we're going to say that what does it mean to lock the gate in a regular way? We're going to say in the Gemara that mukminam to the Gemara dahainu delet shiachol la'ama beruach metzuya. That just means that it will withstand a normal wind. But an animal pushing against it, if it's uncomfortable, is going to happen, and therefore it's not enough to have a simple lock on the system, because if it's in the sun and so uncomfortable, you need to be aware that it is going to try to push its way out, and so that is the lesson of this particular case. So if you leave it in the sun, or Oshemasra lecherish shota v'katan, or you gave it to somebody who is unable to speak and unable to hear, or somebody who is not mentally stable, or to a minor, the yatsa v'hizika, and then it gets out and does damage, well then chayev, then you, the owner, are going to be liable in each of those situations because you should have taken better care. So misara laroa, if you give it over to a shepherd, however, nichnas haroa tachtav, now the shepherd becomes liable in your place. Nafla laginan bananas. What happens if it fell, if the animal accidentally fell into a garden that didn't belong to you? And Rashi tells us, Nafla lagina, bottom of the wide lines in Rashi. So be'ones, be'ones, that it fell by accident. Migag bala, from the roof of the owner. Hasamach laginas chavero, that happens to be near the garden of his neighbor. And this often happens in hilly places like Yerushalayim, where you can have the roof of one person's home being only a little bit higher than the garden of the home above it on the mountain. And so that's what we're talking about, where the homes were built into the mountain. And so the roof of one is just a little bit higher than the garden of the other. And now the animal didn't want to go into into the garden, but it fell in. And so now that it fell in, Osha Haisa Rishusa Rabim Gavoa Minagina Vinafla, or you have a similar situation where it's Rishusa Rabim, not necessarily the owner's Rishus. And in both of these cases, it fell in accidentally. Well, then Mishalemes Manan Shananis. Then the owner is going to have to pay for the damages, but only the value of the benefit that the animal got. So if the animal ate an apple and you would have given it feed, and the apple is worth $2, but the feed that would have filled it up the same amount is worth 20 cents, then you only have to pay the 20 cents. You don't have to pay the $2. Yarda kedarka vehizika. But if, on the other hand, the sheep went into the garden and it in the normal way, it escaped, and your watch mishalemis mashehizika. Well, then you have to pay the full damages. So Ketza Mishalemis Mashesika. How do you pay the full damage? How do you calculate it? So Shaman Besa Beosa Sadeh Kamad Haisag Yafa Bekama Yafa. So you have to basically evaluate how much was it worth before the animal entered and how much was it worth now. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's not a good method of measuring, because Achla Peris Gemurim, if it ate fully ripe fruit that are effectively ready for market, well, then that will underestimate the value of the fruit. So Mishalem is Peros Gemurim. Then you have to pay the full value of ripe produce. Im sa, im satayim. Whether it's 1 sa or 2 sa, you have to pay the full amount. Okay, so that is the closing debate. And now the Gemara asks the question of what does it mean to lock sheep up properly. So Tana Rabbanan, Ezu Karai, the Ezu Shalo Karai. What does that mean? So now we're going to answer it. If a gate can stand up, if the door of the pen can stand up to a normal wind, well, that is considered appropriate. But if in fact, well, then that's not going to be proper. So those are the two possibilities. So Amar Rabbi Mani Bar Patish. So Rabbi Mani says, Mantana Mua Desagile Bishmir Pechusa. Now, on some level, this watching is a very minimal level of watching, because even the animal has the ability to get out on its own. All it has to do is push at a level that's more than a normal wind, and that's not a lot. So as a result, Ramamani says that who is it that says that even a lesser guarding is sufficient for a muad animal? Rabbi Yehuda. It's Rabbi Yehuda. Titanan. Ksharo ba'alav b'mosera. Did we learn this in a Mishnah about a week, about 10 days ago? That if you have you lock an animal up with its rein, v'nal lefan of karoi, or you lock the gate properly, v'yatzav v'hizik, and it goes out and it does damage, echad tam ve'echad muad chayev, you are going to be liable. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says, because this is just a minimal watching, and Rabbi Meir says you need a maximal watching. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, tam chayev muad pater. In the ironic situation, even though a muad is often more strict, here Rabbi Yehuda says that you would be liable for a tam, but you would not be liable for a muad. Why? Because shalom shneamar v'lo yishmerenu ba'alav. Because by a muad, it says that the owner didn't guard it. Well, the shamor, who's that? And this animal, this ox, was in fact guarded. So as a result, even a minimal guarding will be sufficient for a muad when it's not the case for a tam. Eliezer Omer Ein Lo Shmira Elav Saket. The only way you can ever watch an animal effectively is by killing it. So that was the three opinions, and we see that the middle opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, is the one who says that in order that a lesser watching is sufficient for a muad. So doesn't this have to be Rabbi Yehuda, the author of our Mishnah? No, it does not. Afilu tema Rabbi Meir. You can even say it's Rabbi Meir. And Shiny Shane Beregel. Our Mishnah is talking about damage done by walking and by eating and walking. Shane again is the damage that an animal does when it tries to get benefit. So if it's scratching itself and it does damage to something, if it's eating and it does damage to something, all of those, that's shane. Regel is when the animal is just walking, doing its normal lifelong activities, but there isn't any special benefit associated with it. And both of those are going to be different. That Torah mi'ata b'shmiratan, that the Torah reduced the level of watching that's necessary for these things. Because we and some people say it was taught in a brisa. There are 4 situations where a less watching is sufficient. The Elohim, and these are they: bor ve'esh shein v'regel, a pit, a fire, the eating of shein, and the walking of regel. Bor dixiv ki yiftach ish v'ki yiftach ish bor o ki yichre ish bor v'lo yichasenu. That when it comes to a pit, we talk about all you have to do is cover it. So hakiso putter. If you did cover it, you would be exempt because the liability is with not covering it. So even a minor kind of protection that's associated with a cover, that would be sufficient. That the one who kindled the fire is going to pay. The ad of it ke'ain mavir. So in order to be the one that's liable, you have to actually set the fire you have to be like one who set the fire. And that suggests a sense of negligence. It's not enough to just it is enough to just watch a fire. So, and Shane dixiv uvir b'sadeh acher, and it went and consumed in the field of somebody else. Ad avid ke'ain uver, that you have to actually engage in behavior. The owner has to engage in behavior that is almost like encouraging the animal to consume, to eat something. And regel dixiv v'shilach, and he sent forth the animal. This is all from Perek Kafbet Pasuk Dalid. Ki yaver ish sadeh ocherem v'shilach es bi'iro uvi'er b'sadeh acher. Right? If a man leads his animal to a field or a vineyard and he sends forth his animal and it consumes in the field of another, so that's the pasuk that it's talking about. And so as a result, that's why you have to engage in sort of an action of sending forth the animal. So Vitanya, and moreover, don't tell me that shilach and bier aren't referring to regel and shane, because I'll show you we have another brisa. The shilach zeha regel, sending forth has to refer to regel. V'chein hu amar mishalchei regel hashor v'achamor, that you send forth the foot of the ox and the donkey. This is a pasuk in Yeshayahu that shows that shlichut, that sending forth, refers to the foot of a donkey and an ox. Uvier zehashain, and then consuming, that is a reference to shane, of eating. V'chein hu omer, because we have another pasuk. This pasuk is from Melachim Aleph, where it says kasher yivaer hagalal ad tumo, that the tooth consumes until its end. So we see yivaer is referring to shane. So therefore, we have again another parallel situation. Okay, so that is an indication again that both of these are referring to these particular forms of damage. So taima de avid ke'ein b'shilach uvier. So the reason is that one is liable for regel and shane is because you acted like you sent forth, or you one who destroys. Hello, avid lo. But if you didn't act in this way, well, then you wouldn't be liable. And so as a result, Rebbe Meir could be the author of our Mishnah. And this Mishnah is special for Shane and Regel, and we're not talking about Karen. So Amarabba Maslisin Nami Dayaka. And you can actually figure this out from our Mishnah, Dikatani Tzom, because after all, our Mishnah referenced Tzom. Michti, but let's take a look. B'shorka askinam ba'asi. Until now, we almost every aspect of damage that we've been talking about has been talking about an ox doing damage. So Nisne Shore, we should have learned shore here as well, an ox here. So Maishna de Katanitzon. Why did we talk about sheep? La Mishum de HaTorah mi'ata b'shmiratan. Isn't it because the Torah reduces the level of watching that's required for it? La Mishum de Kan Karen v'lo ksiva bay. And that's because over there, we talked about Keren, and we don't have any basis to reduce the watching. But Shane Viregel, who Dixibe. But when it comes to Shane and Regel, then we have a basis of reducing the watching. The Kamash Malan, the Shane Viregel, Demu Adinhu, Shmamina. And this, in fact, teaches us that Shane and Regel are considered like a muad animal. That's why you have to pay when you are obligated in damages. You have to pay 100%. But we limit the liability and allow you to avoid liability if you do a minimal watching. So now the Gemara from here, the Gemara is now going to discuss situations where God will hold you accountable, but you won't be liable in the court of law. And so if you want to hear what those cases are, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a wonderful, wonderful day. Sure.
How does kalim differ from, or is it the same as shatnez?
Kalayim and shatnez. Okay, so excellent question. Shatnez is on some level a kind of kalayim. It's wool and linen. And so it is one can view it as a particular category of kalayim. Now, obviously,
And that's actually how the Mishnah treats it. It is actually dealt with in the last chapter of Yerushalmi Kalayim.
Oh wow! Okay, so there you go. So God willing, we should have the opportunity.
Talking about a shocking halakhic ruling in there on Shabbat.
Now, 1 second. Is the Masechah that you're finishing Kalayim?
Yes.
Oh wow! So it's like a Daf Yomi coincidence. So we have a nice Daf Yomi coincidence. For this Shabbos, he's going to speak on this issue, so you're going to have to be there. So don't miss it. This is immediately following Beit Aaron's Tefillah on Shabbos morning. Looking forward to try. I will certainly try to show up and be there as
Thank
well.
You.
Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. But God willing, I'll see you all tomorrow as we pick up from the two dots near the bottom of Nun Hey Amabet. Looking forward tomorrow. Be well. Bye-bye.
In the bulletin, the special event.
No, these are not advertised. These are two events that are not advertised. So again, so I'm going to end. Have a great day, everybody.